Hi everyone, this is Kang here with Quasar Alchemy, and I'm here to present our philosophy on portraiture lighting. Now, traditionally speaking, you might have seen tutorials about three-point lighting. We have a key, a fill, and a backlight. Three-point lighting is a concept that talks about how do you light a subject. Now, we think about it a little bit in a more conceptual and a little bit more fundamental way of thinking about the actual image and subject matter itself. We want you to get to the heart of the emotion and the story that you're trying to draw out from your subjects. So the way that we like to think about it is something called the 4 C's. Now, the first C is called contour, and contour has to do with defining the shape of the subject. The next C is contrast, where you modulate the mood and the feeling of the image based off the shape that you've created. And next you have clarity, which defines the relationship between the subject with its surroundings. And then finally, color. Now, color is its own separate tool that you can use all 3 different types of elements to tie it together in a certain way, even if it's a monochromatic or fully chromatic scheme. As you think about lighting with this sort of philosophy, it helps you break out of a simple key, fill, backlight mentality and allows you to think a little bit more creatively of how to actually work with your lighting. As you think more qualitatively, you'll be much more clear in the way that you decide to enhance and bring out the emotion of your subjects. So stay tuned and we'll break into each of the 4 C's. So let's talk about contour. When we're talking about contour, we're talking about defining the shape and feeling of your subject. Right now we've got a Q20 Q Lion 2-foot unit, and what I've done here is I've masked it off with tape to make it a harder source. And the reason why I've done this is I want to talk about the shape of the light. And after we talk about the shape of the light, we're going to talk about the positioning of that light, and then we're going to talk about the distance of that light. So let's first go back to the shape of the light. Now, the shape of a light has to do with its relative size to the subject. And when you have a relatively smaller source, you've got a harder light source, as you can see here. And this is at arm's length. I've got about a 2-inch size source. So as you can see, the shadow of my nose, it's a pretty well-defined shadow on my nose. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dim down. And I'm gonna open up to make it a broader source, therefore a larger angle relative to me. So therefore it's a softer source, and the shape of the light has changed. And when you have a relatively larger source in the same position, and I've dimmed it down so you don't have an exposure change, you're going to change the feeling of the actual contour, right? So it's about a 800% increase or larger of an angle on me, and as a result, you can see the shadow on my face is much more softer. It's much less defined because of that larger angle. Next, we've got the direction of that shaped light. I'm going to just slowly pan the light around me, and as you can see, relative to my position, even though you've got the same quality of light, you're going to have a different feel of the contour on me. All right, so now I've made a complete, at this point, 360-degree revolution. Now, this is already a change from the concept of what we consider a key light, where a lot of times photography manuals and photography tutorials will tell you a key light is something that's in front of the subject, which is not necessarily true. What we call the contour light is what defines the shape, and therefore the first step in defining the feel of the subject. So right now, this is a little bit more of a dramatic sort of feel when I've got it as a side light, right? And if I put it more to the front, it's got what is traditionally called a beauty light, or a kind of a flat, kind of brighter sort of feeling. And if I go all the way to the 3/4 back right here, now I've got a super dramatic sort of feeling to my face. Now this is, some people will call this a backlight, but right now, as the only light on me right now that you can see, it's pretty much defining my shape from a certain angle from behind me that makes this the actual key light still, or a contour light. So as I move this back around to here, this is a classic Rembrandt, Renaissance sort of lighting direction. It's a little bit in front of me and from the side. Now, we also have another concept called fall off, or the difference of that mood of the light from one side to the other of my face. If it is a bright source very near to me, the fall off is very dramatic of the brightness from here to here. But if I actually move this light to compensate for that distance, already you're going to see a different fall off on my face. And that fall off on the face has to do with the fact that as something is further away, the amount of change of exposure drops differently from if it was close to here. So as you're further away, the difference is minimal compared to if the light was right next to my face. Essentially, the shape of the subject is defined by that distance change. These three elements define the contour. You've got the shape of the light itself relative to me, you've got the positioning of that light, and you have the distance of that light relative to me. You're going to be able to define the shape of your subject much more closely to the mood of the project that you're shooting. All right, so let's talk about contrast. Right now, I've placed my contour light in a classical, quote-unquote, Rembrandt sort of direction, which is in front of me and a little bit to the left, right? It's a 2-foot Q20 Q-line light. Right now, with its direction and distance, I've metered it to a certain brightness level. And the reason why I'm going to start talking about this is critical to understanding contrast. So this brightness level is defined by what we call a foot candle if you're in America, or a lux if you're anywhere else in the world. Right now, this is about 20 foot candles of luminance on me. And when we're talking about measuring this brightness, the foot candle is really important to understand a lighting contrast ratio. So that's why we're calling this the contrast light, because the contrast light modulates the lighting ratio, which directly affects the mood of this contrast light. So right now, you can see it's a very moody sort of situation because it's just one light apparently on me right now. So I'm going to define that ratio just by metering all the light hitting my face. It's averaging to be about 13 foot candles of the whole scene hitting my face in the middle. If I just then take out that part of the equation, the contour light of the equation, my contrast light is at base level about 1.2 foot candles, which is not a lot of light hitting me right now. So that's basically a 13:1 lighting contrast ratio, which is a very big difference between the bright side and the dark side of my face. This is a very moody sort of feel. So let's now start modulating by changing the contrast. So let's turn on our contrast light, which is a Q5. It's a Q-line light that is about 6 inches. And when I meter now this direct light, which is right in front of me, it's not gonna change the contour too much. It's just changing the contrast between the dark side and bright side of my face. Right now, that's about, at this distance from me, this is about 8.5 to 9 foot candles. So all together, we have 25 foot candles altogether. And we're gonna go to the next contrast ratio, which is gonna go to the next click down, which is about 75% of the light. This contrast light now is at 7 foot candles, and the overall light hitting my face is 21 foot candles. So let's go down to a full stop down, which is 50%, and I'm getting about 5.5 foot candles from that contrast light versus 20 combined altogether. Now, the way I'm metering it, again, is I'm pointing the ball right here, representing my face, to the camera to represent the average of the entire scene, okay? 3.5 foot candle light hitting me from the front, and all together combined, that's about, or 16 foot candles, okay? And then we're gonna get to the final light level. And that final light level is about 2.5 foot candles compared to the combined light level of the whole scene, which is 14 foot candles. So as you can see here, we're gonna turn off again. We're gonna go back to the original light setting, which was a very moody light setting, 13 to 1 foot candles, right? So the 13 to 1 light ratio, that's the contrastiest sort of lighting situation that gives me a certain mood. What we're going to do is flash through all these ratios so you can see and understand how the lighting ratio and its raw power difference modulates the mood and feel of your contour light. All right, so we're going to talk about clarity now. We've already discussed contour light, and we've got a Q20 serving as our contour light. It's from that position and size and distance, we're getting a certain definition of the shadow on my face. Now, in terms of the mood of that light, I reduce that dramatic feel with a contrast light. It's a Q5, it's a 6-inch light right in front of me in order to not change the certain contour on my face. And it's about a 3-to-1 lighting contrast ratio. What that's doing is reducing the shadow difference between the dark side and the bright side of my face. And it's making it seem a lot less dramatic and a little bit more balanced of a feel. And finally, we got a clarity light. Now, you might have heard of this as a backlight. You might have heard of this as a rim light. You might have heard of this as a hair light. That's confusing, and that's why we wanted to redefine it as clarity. And the reason why we're defining it as clarity is it clarifies the subject in relationship to the background. Before, and we're going to show you a clip as I talk right now, with the contour and a contrast light, I still had a certain relationship to the background where because I'm wearing a black shirt and I have black hair, I sort of disappeared into the background, right? And so what the clarity light is doing, it's separating me. It's creating a line in a certain dimension and a certain difference from the background. So that's one function of the clarity light. It clarifies who I am in relationship to the background, but it also shows the influence of the background or the world of the image onto me. And so there's a relationship that you establish with the clarity light. So these are really important concepts to understand. So how do we actually set the brightness or modulate? So once you've set the shape of that clarity light, just like with the contour light, you could have a certain, it could be soft, could be hard. The position of it is a certain height away from me, so it's coming from above me. The intensity right now is actually darker. It's about 10-foot candles roughly versus about 17, 18-foot candles. So it's a little bit less than, a little more than half the intensity of the world in front of me. And the reason why I have it a little bit darker is that when you have a light coming from behind, clarifying and defining who I am, you're going to get two types of reflection. You're getting diffuse reflection and you're getting direct reflection off of your subjects. With that extra direct reflection, you're getting extra intensity. So you, generally speaking, you want to be a little bit darker or a little less intense with the clarity light, as opposed to the contour and your contrast lights. In sum, use your clarity light to define your subject with a relationship to the background and also place your subject in the world in which you're shooting. So let's talk about color now. We've already discussed contour, we've already discussed contrast, and we've discussed clarity. So let's talk about how color can enter into this entire world of lighting to help define your subjects. First, I wanted to discuss the dimension of white light in terms of its color. Now, white light could have two different axes. You've got orange and blue, and you've got green and magenta. So the Q lion that we have as a contour light, right now it's set to 4300 Kelvin. The camera's white balance is 4300 Kelvin. So right now it's at a balanced contour light. So what I'm going to do is have Tristan turn it to 3200 Kelvin. As you warm up a light, quote unquote, what you're doing is you're rebalancing the light to have more red energy, and therefore it turns more of an orange color, all right? The other side of that axis, the complementary color of that is blue. So we're going to go to 5600 Kelvin. So this has a bluer sort of feel, right? And what we're doing again is now redistributing it so that now there's more blue information in that white light, but it's still white light, okay? You can see that as one axis of color for white light. We're going to go back to 4200 Kelvin. So let's talk about another dimension of white light color, and that's green and magenta. So you have essentially green gels, right? Or you can have magenta gels. And what they're doing is essentially also modulating the real white light that you would encounter in the world. And what right now I have on the contrast light, I have a full green, which is taking away the magenta information and making it more of a green light. And then in the clarity light, I have a minus green gel, which is taking away green information. As a result, there's a certain feeling that we're getting from that contrast of color, right? So these are different ways that we can modulate just even white light and its certain color variations. Next, we can also start discussing color theory. Now, generally speaking, if you look at all the colors of the rainbow and you turn into a wheel, you can organize the colors in a wheel that has red, green, and blue as your quote-unquote primary colors. And we're gonna have red as the 0 starting point in the angle, green as 120 degrees, and we're gonna have blue as 240 degrees. And as you look at this, you can see in between each of these colors, you're getting a certain mix of color in between. If you combine the red and the blue, you're gonna get magenta. If you're gonna combine red and green, you're gonna get yellow or orange, and etc. So as you understand this relationship, you can start looking at different color schemes. Right? So as you can see, there are so many different ways as you develop this new understanding of lighting your subjects that you can inject creativity into your lighting setups.